Hi everybody, it's Chris. I'm back with a second video today about Jarrid Wilson. And the reason I'm doing a second video is that the first video was just when I was driving and I was just thinking out loud, and everything I said I believe and I stand by. But when I got home, I decided to do a little bit of research into the specific things that multiple studies have found about the unique kinds of stresses, or maybe they're not unique, but the kinds of stresses that come with being a religious professional in the 21st century. And I'm not at all suggesting that these were the reasons or the causes for what happened to Jarrid. If you don't know, Jarrid Wilson was an associate pastor of a big church, was a strong advocate for destigmatizing mental health and depression, mental health issues and depression and things like that in the Christian community. And I'm assuming that he was from a more conservative theological bent than I reside in, but I don't know that for a fact. I haven't really read any of his stuff or watched any of his sermons. I did see a clip of one about Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, and the chapter on love, and I thought that was really good. The part I saw of it was really good. But anyway, in the time since I posted the first video, there were a lot of views on that, and there were also some comments, and one of the comments was, like, this is refreshing because other videos are saying that, like, Jarrid Wilson's in hell and all this other stuff. I'm just like, and then there was this really long, elaborate comment that I just deleted that was a bunch of bullshit, just typical, like, neo-Calvinist. I don't know. Anyway, I'm talking inside baseball now, but my point is not to do that. My point is to say, if you're struggling with mental health issues, if you're struggling with suicidal ideation, the national crisis line is 1-800-273-8255. But I want to talk about this from the perspective of as a pastor, and not sort of a pastoral way, but the nuts and bolts of the job, because I don't know Jarrid's own personal story and his struggles and where they started and what they were about, but I do know that the church, like society in general, is terrible at working through the destigmatization of these issues, and we get afraid and we feel self-conscious, whether we're people of faith or not. We want to refuse to admit when we're struggling, and I don't know if it's our culture or if it's our upbringing or what it is that tells us that you can never show signs of weakness, and you always have to pretend that you have everything together, and that's what leads to people not feeling supported, and really it only strengthens the sense of isolation and hopelessness. But I want to share a couple things. There's an organization called Soul Shepherding, which has put together some statistics from 10 different studies of religious professionals, and these are studies by places like the Barna Group and things. Now, I think Soul Shepherding is probably a more conservative group, but the research seems to be from from across the spectrum. And when I'm looking at the footnotes, these are legit surveys. It's not just sort of wishful thinking or whatever. But so here's some things that they found, that this survey of these 10 in-depth studies have found. 75% of pastors report feeling extremely stressed or highly stressed. 90% feel fatigued and worn out every week. I have to say, on a Sunday when I get home, I'm exhausted. And I'm an outgoing person, but it takes a lot out of you. I don't know. It takes a lot of energy. And I love doing it, but I get home and I crash for hours. It's like I'm knocked out. But 90% feel fatigued and worn out every week. 70% say they're grossly underpaid. Well, it's probably because 90% work between 55 and 70 hours per week, and they're probably on 40-hour contracts. 40% report a serious conflict with a parishioner at least once a month. 78% were forced to resign from their church. 63% at least twice, most commonly because of church conflict. Now, I want to stop here for a second. There are obviously religious professionals, clergy, who are abusive, and we know about that because of all kinds of headlines, and we know about the tragedy and the horror involved in some of the most obvious cases, or some of the most high-profile cases of that. But there's also a way in which religious professionals, like the leaders of any organization, can be much more subtly abusive, and that's real, and that happens. And I've had the unfortunate experience of knowing some people who I would say, for reasons that probably have a lot to do with their own biochemistry, sort of fall into the category of people who have either emotionally or psychologically or spiritually been abusive to parishioners. So those people are out there. So I'm not saying boo-hoo for them, but again, their brokenness comes from somewhere. I'm not excusing it because it's very damaging. But I say all that to say that sometimes people are removed from the pastorate or from a specific church, or are asked to resign from a church for very legit reasons, and they do need to go. But sometimes it's because the conflict is just too much, because, like I said in my previous video, the loneliness of this job is such that you don't really have peers in the community that you serve, and not in a true sense of the word. And especially if you're a solo pastor, which most pastors are, you're the only one who's really gone through extensive training in how to do the job that you do, and yet you are being reviewed and critiqued, and in many cases, I don't know what the word is, you're being put through the ringer sometimes by people who aren't trained to do what you do. So it's an odd thing. One of these studies says 80% of the people of clergy will not be clergy people 10 years beyond the survey parameters, and only a fraction made it a lifelong career. 100% of Reformed and evangelical pastors, and this is a specific area of Christianity, but 100% of 1,050 Reformed and evangelical pastors had a colleague who had left ministry because of burnout, church conflict, or moral failure, and that, who knows what that means, but burnout and church conflict are real clergy killers. 91% say that they've experienced some form of burnout in ministry, and 18% say they are fried to a crisp. I've definitely used that word, fried. And again, this isn't to call anybody out or anything like that. It's just to say that people don't really understand the emotional and the spiritual and the psychological work that goes into being a religious professional, regardless of the denomination or the religion. It's just a lot. 70% of pastors say they have a lower self-esteem now than when they first entered ministry. 70% constantly fight depression. I'm going to link these studies in the description. 50% feel so discouraged that they would leave their ministry if they could, but can't find another job. And there's some more things that some of which are, to me, not as interesting or not as important or not as glaring. 70% of pastors say they do not have someone they consider a close friend. So, yeah. All right, so that's that. I also want to share some thoughts from a doctor named Shauna Springer. She's a PhD. She says this: those who serve within the clergy are often driven by a deep and abiding mission, a calling that sometimes has roots in childhood intuition. Many within the clergy derive a great sense of purpose, sometimes even life-saving purpose, from inspiring hope and pointing us to a life of faith and reliance on God. However, when clergy become public examples of strength, there is an additional pressure placed on their shoulders as they hold the hope of those within their sphere of ministry. Becoming a caregiver to one individual in need, or the metaphorical shepherd of an entire flock, can be lonely and isolating, and increase the challenge of reaching out and getting support from both professionals and peers. I'm going to stop there for a second. Sometimes pastors, or people in general, are just too damn prideful. They've bought into their own hype, and they've come to believe that they are fully sufficient and equipped to deal not only with everybody else's issues, but also with their own. These are the kinds of pastors who don't refer people to mental health professionals, okay? That's bad. Don't do that. get help for yourself and refer your people to help, because unless you're a psychologist or a psychiatrist yourself, you're not equipped to give adequate counseling to people in every situation, okay? Now, back to the article by Shauna Springer. The leaders among us may become our lighthouses, helping keep us safe, holding strong against the storm of life's challenges. But what happens when the lighthouse itself becomes enveloped by lashing waves and raging seas? In other words, life happens, right? That was my editorial comment. Back to the article. How does that lighthouse signal distress? Who looks out for the lighthouse? And how can we make sure that all of us can turn toward the tribe of those we love and trust to lend us the strength to stay in the fight? Professional therapy can be life-saving in some cases. And then it goes on and on. But it says, no matter your role, your pain is valid, and there are places to renew your strength and your hope. If you or someone you know is struggling, please reach out for support. 1-800-273-8255. Last thing I want to read, I only have a few minutes left. This is from Kay Warren. Now, normally I wouldn't quote Kay Warren, but her son died by suicide, and she wrote an article just a couple years ago about what pastors go through sometimes, and how depression and suicidal ideation and everything can affect pastors. And so here's this from Kay Warren. Pastors are people first, ordinary men and women who are vulnerable to the same illnesses, life circumstances, and woes as the rest of us. Yet they have the added stress of living in glass houses, always under the watchful eye of church members. Sometimes both faith leaders and the congregation forget that pastors are merely human and expect superhuman feats of endurance, wisdom, and knowledge. The unrealistic expectation that pastors and their families walk on water can only lead to deep disappointment and disillusionment, which can be lethal. Please stop expecting your pastor to be anything more than a frail and fragile human being like you. Seek ways you can use your gifts, talents, and passions to share the load of your pastor. When you see hungry people, feed them. When you know people who are sick, go visit them. If the church lawn is overgrown, crank up your mower and give a hand. Rather than sit back and watch your pastor or priest or rabbi burn out from exhaustion and too high expectations, volunteer and become a contributor instead of a spectator. Take care of your pastor. Seek to be a safe, non-judgmental person who your pastor can come to when he or she is hurting. And pastors, please don't struggle alone. That's from Kay Warren. I don't think Jarrid Wilson struggled alone, but I don't know. I don't know him personally. I know he's very public about his struggles, and I think that he had a support network from what it seems like. His suicide is not a failing of his faith. It's not a failing of his strength. It's not a failing of his character. It's a failing of his biochemistry. What else can I say? I mean, we need to support people who are in pain. We need to support people who reach out. We need to support people who express that they need help. And I don't know in Jarrid's case how he could have been any more clear about the help that he needed. And I don't know all the details of what help he did or didn't get, or was or wasn't willing to get, but I know that publicly he was very outspoken about connecting people to that same kind of help. My heart breaks for him and for his wife and for their 2 young boys. And people need to realize that if you're a Christian, or even if you're not a Christian, I don't care. The love of God transcends so much. Jarrid Wilson's not in hell. Jarrid Wilson is in the arms of Jesus, if you're a Christian and you believe that, right? So I don't want to hear the comments that talk about all the ways that Jarrid has sinned. This is a man who is in pain, and this is a man who is hurting. And pain and hurt aren't excuses, right, to hurt others or to hurt ourselves, but nobody's looking for an excuse. Nobody's positing an excuse. What we're saying is this is a sickness. To quote the great late theologian Mitch Hedberg, nobody says, damn it, Otto, you have lupus. Why would we say, damn it, Jarrid, you're depressed. Damn it, Jarrid, you've got mental health issues. Damn it, Jarrid, you've got suicidal ideation, right? This isn't Jarrid's fault. God doesn't see it that way either. I don't know what his community will be going through in the next few days, weeks, months, years. But again, if you yourself are struggling, please reach out. Please reach out. Please call the hotlines. Please reach out to somebody that can connect you to the right resources, because it can get better, and it does get better. And there is so much beauty, and there is so much goodness to experience in this life, let alone whatever we think about the life beyond. Experience the abundant life that the Holy intends for you here and now, and please take whatever steps you need on journeys toward wholeness. God bless you, Jarrid Wilson. God bless your family, and God bless anyone watching.